Welcome back to Caratootie. This is Ingrid Carlsen, and if you are brand new here and just stumbled upon my video, I am so glad that you did. I hope that you'll consider subscribing to my channel and, more importantly, going to check out some of my other videos that I think that you might like. For those of you that have been with me for a long time, welcome back, friend. Today I am going to be making some vintage tape that you guys have been asking me for the process for. So before we get started, I do want to preface this by saying that I do have a lot of inks and you do not need to have this many. You actually only need a couple of colors. The first thing that you're going to need is some freezer paper. I have also been told that parchment paper works really well if you don't have the other on hand. What I like about freezer paper is that you can use it over and over again. Then I'm going to use alcohol inks, and I have a lot of different varieties from really cheap Amazon ones to more expensive ones. I'm also going to be experimenting with some of Tim Holtz's other products like the Distress Stain, Oxide, and the Reinkers, which I've never used before, but I was pleasantly surprised. I used some masking tape, some packing tape. I ended up having to go run to Dollar Tree and get some tape, and you'll see why later. And then also some Scotch tape, which I forgot to show here. Now that little blower tool for the alcohol ink, it's definitely optional, but I had it, so I thought I'd use it. I'm going to show you how to use makeup applicators or makeup sponges to apply the alcohol ink, although it is definitely not my favorite technique. And I do oftentimes use a paintbrush, but be very careful that you don't use one that you absolutely love or that is that expensive. So you can choose to make your piece of freezer paper as big or as small as you want. I like to work in big quantities because I can kind of mass create, and then when I'm in the process of creating my spreads, then I don't have to stop and make any. I have some on hand, and you guys have seen me pull these big pages out. The main thing I wanted to tell you though, when you're using freezer paper, there are two sides. There's the shiny side and the dull side. You do not want to use the dull side because your tape will stick. You want to use the shiny side. Think of a sticker paper when you pull it off and it's got that like shine to it. For the demonstration of aging tape, the colors that I mainly used were shades of yellow. I also have a little orange and brown in there, and I will have all the products that I used and that I like linked in my Amazon storefront in case you want to take a look. I almost forgot to tell you guys, but I also like to use either the blending solution or alcohol. And in this video, I'm going to use the alcohol because I really love the effect that it gives. So I'm going to start off with this little experiment here. And I'm going to lay a thin layer of alcohol on this masking tape and then the ink on top of it. Whereas on the right hand side, I'm just going to go in straight with the ink to see the difference. And the main thing that I can tell is that it just made the ink a lot more vibrant. And so that's something to keep in mind. I do love using alcohol though, because it does extend it, and depending on how light you want it, like especially when you're dealing with a transparent tape, then it'll allow you to get an even lighter application. And that's why I was saying that I don't really love the makeup sponges. I'd much rather use a brush. I do not recommend that you use your fingers. I believe the alcohol inks are somewhat toxic, and so I did not use gloves because I'm filming, but normally when I'm dealing with alcohol inks, I wear gloves, and sometimes I even have to wear a respirator mask because it tends to make me a little on the dizzy side. So that's just a heads up. Just as when I am creating art, I love experimenting and just playing with different colors because you never know what creations you're going to make. And look at how beautiful those like little drops of alcohol look when they react with the alcohol ink. I love this technique. And so for me, when you use a makeup sponge, it's going to give you a more dulled version of that. And I like the vibrancy and the different textures that you get that are unexpected. So just play around with it and you might like the look of the makeup sponge instead. Here you're going to see where I'm using that tape and the alcohol ink is not happy at all. Like you can see, it is not sticking at all. I have no idea. At that point, I was losing daylight and I started panicking. What I will tell you, if this happens to you, don't waste that alcohol ink. Try to use it in other places. I tried using the sponge here and it did not want to budge. You can see it gave it a very light coat, but definitely not what I was looking for. I went and grabbed one of my Distress Oxide ink pads and decided to try this. I've never worked on this method, but I think with my brush, since it had a little bit of the alcohol in it, it allowed the ink to spread, and I actually ended up really liking the result of that of the pad. So if you do not have alcohol ink, this is great news, because then you can still use your ink pads in order to get kind of the same effect. And just remember, you're going to want to use a little bit of alcohol, and a little goes a long way for you to spread that out. As you can see here, I'm just using the residue that was left on my brush to make some extra tape. So definitely a little goes a long way. I do want to add a little warning. Some of the Tim Holtz alcohol inks, for me, come out really quickly, especially it seems like the darker colors. And so just be very careful when you tip it over, maybe only go like a 45-degree angle. You can always use the product like you see I'm doing there. And then another thing is to clean your brush out. You're going to want to take just a little bit of alcohol on, you can use your freezer paper and just kind of clean it off like you would water on, like with a watercolor brush. And then I give it a good wash with some soap and water. And I couldn't give up on that tape. One, because I don't like wasting things, and two, because I had to make it work. So I tried with the Reinkers ink and the sponge, and that did give me a better effect, although I did not have any Reinkers in the colors I was looking for. But if you have them, then that is a good alternative. And for that one, I definitely would use the sponge. But what I was most surprised and excited about were the distress paints and stains. I think that they worked really nice. Because they did, I decided to try this Dylusions spray ink, which should not work because it shouldn't work on a slick surface. But where I did like it was some masking tape, because that does have an absorbency factor where it will sink in, and I thought this was really nice, even sprayed on. And that's what I just want to encourage you, is to play. And just because I have the tools that I have, or I have the colors that I have, it doesn't mean that you have to have the same thing. And so look in your stash and see what colors you have. If you don't have alcohol ink to make the transparent tape, I definitely think you should make this masking tape, because look at those colors. Look how yummy that is. And I think that'll look really nice on any page. I was losing daylight, but I had to run over to Dollar Tree, which had a lot of stuff. And so I'm going to do another video for you guys. They haven't really had a bunch of things, and I grabbed some of their tape. Now, their tape is super hard to take off the roll. As you saw there, it took forever, and that's sped up like 20%. It's really ridiculous. And not 20%, 20 times. But For this, I love the tape. Also, I want to encourage you, try crinkling this tape. It'll give you more texture, and I think that you'll like it if you're anything like me. And I had to zoom in for this process. You can see how well the Dollar Tree tape takes the alcohol ink. It's like spreading out and it's so lovely. And wait until you see, did you see that when I added the alcohol? It's so good. And this is what I love this tool for, is to give me that just grungy effect. I think you can use a straw for this. I already have problems with the alcohol inks, and so I would not use a straw. But if you're feeling adventurous, you can try it. Just make sure you don't breathe that in. I love all of the textures of adding multiple colors on a piece of tape makes. And also it adds an extra surprise when you're taking the tape off of the paper and you're using it, because you're not sure what piece you're going to use, and you could have an edge that has that dark. I think it's just so yummy. What do you guys think about this? I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this a little bit and let you watch the process, but if you have any questions, leave them down below. And this is my favorite part, where we can look at the effects. You can see here where I use that blower tool and the amount of texture and interest that it gives. And then here was the applicator sponge, and it is just more of a uniform color. You can use the sponge to add extra texture to it, but I just love the grunginess of adding multiple colors and having them more distressed. And I was going to end the video here just showing you a little piece of all the tapes on this vintage book page, but I decided to add a little journal with me at the end of the video, so make sure that you stay tuned to check it out. Oh, and one more thing, the longer you leave the alcohol to dry, the better. Some of it does or can rub off just a little bit, and so that's just my little disclaimer to save your hands so they don't look like mine. Here are my end results, and I absolutely love every single one. I'm wondering what your favorite is, so let me know down below. And on that piece of masking tape that seemed to have stuck to my freezer paper, it's okay. I'm just going to use some glue to glue it down. And so if that happens to you, that's what you can do as well. Do not throw it away. Use it. So I'm showing you here, there is a little bit of residue, and with the Scotch tape, I don't seem to get any. In Ingrid's usual fashion, I'm using what I have on my desk, and that included some dictionary page as well as some of this paper that I think that's paper that I got from Dollar Tree. And if you didn't watch that haul of the paper packs, that's where that one is, and I'll link that one down below. When I added my tape here, I wanted to cut it, but then kind of have it rip like you normally would with Scotch tape, since that's the look that I'm mimicking. And so that's a good way to do that. that brings me to the topic of the tape width. Even though you're using a packing tape, or I'm using a packing tape in this case, I rarely use it with the width that it is. I cut it up into smaller strips so that I can use even skinnier tape, which I think looks even lovelier. Of course, I had to use some rusty staples, and if you haven't seen that video, it's one video behind this where I show you how to rust very easily. And so it is definitely one of my favorite things to add to my layouts. And I'm going to finish it off by adding just 2 more skinny strips of the tape along the edge just to show you what it would look like. I honestly don't know if there's a thing as too much old tape on a page. Are you guys in the same boat, or are you like, no, you're going overboard and you need to reel it back in? I don't think so. I think it came out charming. I think it's perfectly vintage and I loved it. I can't wait to hear what you guys think, and I will see you soon.